It's just lovely. Thank you
Thank
for this
you.
book. Um, I know some here who do co-writing with me know that I read children's books sometimes as part of our liturgy, like what we're doing with the poems. Sometimes I'll use children's books instead. So I get to use yours now. Um, in that way. And I still give children's books to my big kids, like picture books. And I think well-written children's literature is for all ages. And
Mm.
I'm wondering what role children's literature has played in your life throughout different seasons and stages.
Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, obviously I grew up with it. So I devoured books. We lived at the public library when I was a kid. Something that not probably that many people know is that my first job, um, sort of after getting my MFA in poetry, I taught for a year and I decided I don't really want to move from university to university and sort of do that itinerant academic life. I really wanted to come back to Columbus, Ohio and live 20 minutes from my mom and dad and do Sunday dinners and fish in the creek behind Mimi and Papa's house, because I'm a homebody. And so my first real job after graduate school was working in Kidlit. So I worked for the Junior Library Guild as a copywriter for a while. And I worked as an assistant editor for a little boutique children's book publisher, like reading the slush and helping with developing the manuscripts with the authors and making them into viable book projects. And then I left and went to McGraw-Hill and worked in educational publishing for a while, writing, materials in English and like reading and language arts materials for, K-12. And I worked for Highlights for Children for a while after that before going freelance. So I actually have a kind of background in Kidlit, but still did not have it in my mind that I would write a children's book. I always just thought I would write poetry. The deep irony of that is the last four books, and then if you count the next one, are five books that are in five different genres. So I've again, rule breaking. I have not learned to stay in my lane. So I like to try new things. And and so this children's lit's been really important to me as a parent too. I mean, I got so many picture books for these kids and read them until they fell apart and then had to buy new copies of some of the favorite ones. And it's the book I give everybody when they're expecting. It's the gift I still am the aunt who gives my nieces and nephews books, regardless of age, every holiday or birthday, whether they like it or not. Because I feel like that's what you get when your aunt is a writer. You're going to get books and not video games. And so it's always been important to me. And so now it's like this, like I was saying before, the kind of ways that I feel like I'm doing the most good or can be of most service are as a parent and as a writer. And so weirdly, this is the first book project really that I felt like I've been able to merge those two things because I really wrote this as a poet and as a mom. Um, and the book is like, speaking of true crime ripped from the headlines, this book is ripped from our lives. I mean, all of those memories are Rhett's. Like I just used the ones that he used in bed. The illustrations it looks different from our house, and that dog is not our dog, and my parents don't look quite like that. But really the story is a true story. It's more or less nonfiction. This is the conversation. When you have a poet for a mom, she does say things like thoughts are like birds. I mean, it's your lot in life if your mother's a poet.
Yes, and I think that's wonderful, but I'm sure some kids are like, God, can you please quit poeting me or whatever.
Oh, some kids, you mean my kids. Like I will be walking and I'll say something. And one of them, this happened years ago. I mean, Violet was probably 8 and she's 15 now. She was like, yeah, 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 we know, Mom, it's a metaphor. We get it. Like, just stop. So I think probably if they had a parent who was a mathematician or something, they'd be sick of numbers, but they have a mom who's a poet. So they're like, yada, yada, yada. We know what alliteration is.
Well, I'm glad they know that. And I think I mean, I would want to be on the receiving end of it. So hopefully I'm sure they love it and they'll appreciate it more when they're older, right? Isn't that
I
what it
hope
works?
so. Yeah.
So I'll do one more question about the book and then open it up for questions. Um, can you talk a bit about how this book, at least in part, is helping you inhabit the mind, body, and soul space you're experiencing and or desiring?
Oh, you know what? I think it's that it's what's the word I want to use? It's integration, I think is the
Mm.
word I want to use. This book feels like integration to me. I mean, I think I have spent a lot of my writing time feeling like if when I'm doing that or traveling for it or teaching for it, that I'm not being like 100% great mom because frankly, like doing what I do takes me away from them sometimes, whether I'm physically gone or just I'm in a room and can't be bothered because I'm in the flow and I just need to get this thing out. And then I spend the time that I'm with them loving it to pieces, but also thinking I've got a deadline and there are 50 emails I haven't gotten to. And I feel like I'm not being a wonderful working human sometimes too. And so I often feel kind of fractured in like or having to toggle and go back and forth between these two things that I really both feel are my life's work. And working on this book and tomorrow, releasing this book feels like this sort of beautiful integrated experience for me. And I think ultimately is like a reminder that that I can do both,
Mhm.
and that frankly, like even the poem that I read earlier, that parenting is feeding the writing, and that my sort of like my metaphor making brain and the sort of poet in me actually does feed my parenting. It makes me a different kind of parent, you know. Really both poetry and I think caregiving requires so many of the same things. And maybe first on the list is attentiveness. Like attention is a form of love, whether you're giving it to a piece of writing that you're reading or writing and working on, or whether you're giving it to your students or whether you're giving it to your kids or whoever it is in your life that you're giving attention to or whatever it is in your life. It's a way that kind of devotion is a kind of love. Um, and so I'm thinking like more and more about that it's not either or, it's and. Like
Yeah.
that's the spirit I want to sort of go forward with right now is like really embracing I can make up words because I'm a poet, embracing andness,
Yeah.
you know?
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. Um, I want to open it up for questions and I want to let Kelly go first because I think Kelly, you might not need to leave early. Is that still true?
I mean, I'm just on the East Coast and I'm a sleepy girl, but
Oh, I'm with you. I'm on the East Coast too. I will actually, my kids are in bed and I will be tucking myself in as soon as we're done. I'm
okay,
drinking
good.
chamomile tea, Kelly, so I'm so with you.
Well, this is the question that I wanted to ask you is I'm somebody who struggles with sleeping at night, and I know that you've wrote about this and this book is about this. And I just finished reading your memoir, like in like insane little bits and pieces at like 4 a.m. as I couldn't sleep. And I was wondering if you could like speak to that experience of like not sleeping and what that does for your writing.
Nothing good. It does nothing good for my writing, except for the fact that I do it when I'm not sleeping. Because on my little bedside bookcase, I keep my tiny computer. I know you're not supposed to do that. But when I wake up in the middle of the night and I can't sleep, if I can't immediately go back to sleep, sometimes I'll be up for literally 2 hours. I'm a 2 to 4 is a time that my brain loves to be active. So if I go to sleep at 9:30, I'm probably going to be up at 2 and I can go back to bed at 4 and sleep another few hours. And so I work in the notes function on my iPhone in the middle of the night if I can't go back to sleep, because at least I'm doing something and I can do it in the dark because my phone is its own light. So I don't have to turn a light on to read. I can just sort of think through something, or sometimes I'll pull up an old draft on it and kind of, tinker around a little bit there. And honestly, those middle of the night times, your brain is sort of soft. You've maybe come out of a dream. You maybe want to go back into a dream. I find that like very early morning, very late night, and middle of the night, that the sort of like veil is a little thin. I feel a lot more kind of porous, which is a good state of mind to be in to write. You want to be kind of permeable. You're not in email mode, you're not in laundry mode, you're not in like to-do list mode. It's not admin time. And so like cutting myself some slack instead of beating myself up for 2 hours that I can't sleep, I just try to like take advantage of that sort of porosity and see what happens. But I write much better in the morning if I've had 9 hours. I just can't trust my brain to allow that. I wish you
Um,
good sleep though.
Yes, I wish all of us could sleep, but I will say, like Cole Arthur Riley, I did one of these with her in her new book. She writes in the middle of the night.
Yep.
You write in the middle of the night. Kelly, you're writing in the middle of the night. Like it's kind of cool to know that we're all kind of writing in the middle of the night when we're not sleeping. Sarah. So we're not alone.
No.
Kind of like the prayers of the saints, the writing of the people who can't sleep. We're all in it together. Awesome. So does anyone else have a question? Thank you for that question, Kelly.
I have a question. You talked about being useful and being of service in the world as a writer and as a mom. And I'm a mother, and I have just come into writing sort of later in life. And so I have a career that's not particularly writing. Was that a natural like perspective on your writing, is I am doing good in the world by writing? And how do you deal with, if you ever have like, is my writing the kind of thing that would be useful in the world? And now
Mhm.
you know it is, but before you knew it was, did you always know?
I did not. No, and that was never really the intention. I mean, I think, 4 years ago I published a self-help book, not a genre I ever thought I would publish in, because I didn't think when I mean sort of be of service and do good in the world, I wasn't thinking that directly or that literally. Like I think poetry is I think actually all literature is self-help. I think reading any book is good for us, and writing any book is good for us. That book just happened to be self-help for me because it literally helped me as I was writing it. But no, I really never thought sort of pre that project that I never really thought about it in that way. I really didn't. It's just, and this will sound self-deprecating, but I swear to you that it is not. It is the only thing that I have ever been good at. Truly. I have no hand-eye coordination. I'm just learning how to cook. I'm really, it was something I jumped on so quickly and so early because it just clicked with me. Like, oh, that's the thing I can do. And it's how I imagine Nico Case felt when she got in the shower and sang maybe for the first time as a young girl and realized like I can do that, or I mean, I think there are probably, or someone who like ran a foot race in elementary school and just smoked everyone and thought my legs can do that. And I still sort of don't understand it. When I write, it often feels like it's kind of coming through me, like something I'm watching happen rather than something I'm making happen. Um, it's incredibly strange, but I don't feel that way about anything else in my life. Like nothing other than mothering feels that natural to me. And so I have to believe, honestly, regardless of what it is, even if I wrote true crime novels, which wouldn't that be fun? I would maybe wouldn't have to watch it on TV. I have to believe that no matter what it is that I'm making, if it feels that natural to me, that it's what I'm supposed to be doing. And therefore, it is how I am doing the most good and being of service, not only to others, but to myself. I mean, no one wants to feel like a round, a square peg in a round hole. And when I'm doing this work, I feel like it fits. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Thank you, Maggie, and thank you, Susan. Sarah, did you have a question?
I did, and I have forgotten it.
Sorry, real quick. It's 8:02. Maggie, do you have time to answer a question from Sarah
Yeah,
and
of
Lauren?
course.
Okay. Okay.
I forgot my original question, but I do have another one, which is I have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, and
You're in it.
I am very much in it. And I would love to hear what your writing life looked like with tiny people.
Well, maybe it'll make you feel better to know it didn't look like much when I had tiny people. Please know that that is normal and okay.
Yeah.
It is all hands on deck with a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old. My children are 4 years apart, so I would have had a 1-year-old and a 5-year-old, or a 3-year-old and a 7-year-old, and that is different. I will say that that is different. Like having one in diapers and one who's like maybe potty training, that is a whole other animal. I didn't even write the first year that Violet was born. I didn't write for a year. I mean, I had a newborn and I wrote the first poem finally that processed all of that existential shift after a year of her being on the planet. And for that entire year, I thought it's never going to come back. I guess I was a poet for 30, I guess I was a poet until I was 31 and now it's over and I'm not going to get to do it anymore. Well, that was a nice run. I got a couple books done, it came back. And I've had difficult seasons in my life when I wasn't writing very much because I feel like all of my mental process was going to I was in survival mode, right? Which is not really like creativity generator mode. And it always comes back. So I guess what I would say to you is if it's one of those times when you don't feel like much is cooking, fear not. It's actually cooking. It's cooking up here. And what I have found is when I finally sit down and I feel like I've got the sort of headspace and time and everything, it just will start to, it's all percolating, right? You just have to give it time. It's going to come back. It's going to come back.
Thank you.
Fear not.
Yes, that's encouraging. Lauren, did you have a question for Maggie?
I do. You talked a lot about needing a lot of alone time, and being an introvert. I'm the same way. I need so much alone time. But I'm curious what and how you carve out time when when you have burnt out and over peopled and when you still have demands and you still have 2 kids, and how you create that when it doesn't seem possible.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I have learned to not feel guilty about canceling plans. I just don't anymore. And I actually don't even lie. Like I feel like 10 years ago, I probably would have been like, something's come up or I've got a conflict and actually now I feel like it's important to sort of normalize what I need as a human being, because maybe in normalizing what I need as a human being, I'll give someone else permission. You never know who that person is who needs it to also do that thing for themselves. So I have no problem if I've got 3 nights in a week where I'm supposed to be someplace. I may not be able to cancel all those things because I said I would, moderate someone else's book launch. Well, I'm not going to cancel on that person. I'm going to moderate the book launch. But maybe I don't do the dinner after, right? Maybe I don't do the dinner the next night that I was supposed to do with a friend that I really want to catch up with, even though I really want to catch up. Maybe I give myself 3 hours during the day where I turn my phone off and go take a walk and ignore my inbox, despite the fact that I probably need to look at my inbox. And I just don't think there's anything wrong with saying, you know what, I've hit a wall. I need to, I was at this conference and I had a reading, and then everyone went out to dinner, and it was like 10 people, and there was a reservation and I was supposed to go. And I just begged off and I said, I've hit my limit. And I love you all, and I would love to catch up with you, and I would love to spend more time with you or meet these other people who are going to be there. But I just know myself and I feel very cooked. And so I'm going to go home and take care and, to take a bath and self-regulate. And maybe somebody who was going to that dinner also felt that way, but felt like they couldn't cancel, and maybe they didn't, but maybe the next time something comes up, they'll be like, oh, you're actually allowed to say, I need some time for me. Like I'm not volunteering at my son's class Valentine's Day party on Valentine's Day. I normally do. And it's been one of those crazy weeks. And I just didn't do the sign up. And then I thought, so what? I volunteer for all the things. No one's going to call me and be like, why aren't you on the sign up, genius? Just it's okay to like send paper plates or not. You don't. So I'm just learning to just beg off when I need to, and also just be honest about it, and be honest about why. Yeah.
That's wonderful. May we all be honest about canceling plans in the near future.
It's okay.
Well, thank you so much, Maggie. I have really appreciated this, and thanks to all of you for being here. There was a poem that I asked you to read at the end, but if you think of another one, if another one comes to mind that feels like a better fit, you can read a different one. And I would love for those who have joined us, if you want to write a word or phrase, in the chat that you want to take away with you from our time together, or or something hopeful for Maggie as she launches this book. You can add that to the chat. I don't have my phone. Yeah, I do. I'll set my timer for 1 minute, because I never know how long a minute is. And then Maggie will close us out with a poem. Does that sound good? Okay. And y'all can add to the chat now, or while she's reading, or even after she reads, or you can skip. Okay. 1 minute, and then we'll hear one more poem. Okay, that's almost a minute.
I'm going to go off script and read a different poem.
Great.
So I'll say, Charlotte had asked me to read How Dark the Beginning, which is in Goldenrod. And then I just was thinking, Kelly, because of your question and talking about sleep and night reading, about this very short poem and goldenrod. And it was inspired by during sort of peak pandemic lockdown, all of the people who were baking sourdough bread suddenly. Did you also have people in your social media feeds who had sourdough starters? I did not do that. I've never baked my own bread, but I used it as a metaphor for writing. So this poem is called Prove. I let a thought prove in my head overnight. In the morning, I check to see what's risen. I try to expect nothing, which is exactly what I deserve. What kind of woman demands her head deliver? But sometimes I wake to a thought doubled, tripled in size, and as good sour as anything grown in the dark.
That's a perfect way to wrap us up. Yeah, the poem I picked out was a little heavy and dark, but also lovely. Wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm going to stop the recording, and I have one question, a quick one to ask you at the very, very end. Thank you so much, everyone. You're welcome to hear the answer to this question if you want.